The bear. All Omegas were killers. I had learned that the hard way when the first Omega I married drove a blade into my neck. I swore I would never make that mistake again. And yet, when an unavoidable marriage alliance came to me, I had no choice but to accept it. But the Omega before me was not the one I had been promised. The one I was meant to wed lay dead in his bedchambers. Lies everywhere. Deceivers. Nothing good ever came from loving an Omega, and I had sealed my heart in frost. My palace had become a wasteland of ice and snow, a kingdom frozen to match my own resolve. And then there was Kaelen. In his eyes burned more honesty than I had ever known how to hold. His mother would burn because she was a witch, but I could not stop wondering what spells he was casting upon me to make me burn for him instead.
Welcome to the official YouTube channel of J.K. Jones, where listeners can enjoy romance audiobooks for free. Please like and subscribe to stay up to date with the latest releases. This audiobook is protected by copyright law. No part of it may be reproduced, distributed, or transmitted in any form or by any means, including recording or electronic methods, without the prior written consent of the author. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. To support ongoing content creation, consider joining the Patreon. Every contribution helps keep the stories alive.
Chapter 1. Kaelen. I shoved through the crowd, heart in my throat, breath burning cold in my lungs. The villagers pressed in on all sides, jeering, shouting, their voices a roar in my ears. I barely heard them. All I could see was my mother. Solveig, on her knees in the snow. Her wrists were bound, her face calm but pale. Stones littered the ground around her, blood already painting the white at her temple. Someone had struck her. Someone dared. "Witch!" a man bellowed, arm cocked back with another rock in hand. "No!" The word tore out of me too late. The stone flew. I didn't think I moved. The world blurred. Snow crunched beneath my boots as I lunged forward, shoving past grasping hands, stumbling into the circle just as the rock found its mark. It struck me instead. White pain exploded across my cheekbone, hot and sharp. I staggered, vision sparking, the taste of iron flooding my mouth. Gasps rippled through the crowd. They hadn't expected anyone to protect her, especially not me. The outcast Omega. I dropped to my knees beside my mother, blood dripping down my jaw, and wrapped myself around her. "You'll have to kill me too," I snarled, voice shaking but loud enough to carry. The villagers hissed like wolves denied a kill. But in my mother's eyes, calm, steady, unbroken, I saw something else. Not fear, not despair. Hope. And I swore right there, blood on my lips, that they would not burn her. Not while I still drew breath. The stone clipped me hard against the cheekbone, hot blood spilling down before I even felt the sting. The villagers howled louder, voices sharpening like knives in the bitter air. "Look at his eyes," one jeered, pointing at me with a gnarled finger. "Cursed pale blue. Demon spawn, just like his witch of a mother. Should have drowned him at birth." Another spat, laughter following like cruel thunder. I clenched my jaw, fury burning hotter than the pain. My mother trembled beside me, still on her knees in the mud, her thin shoulders bowed under the weight of their hatred. I grabbed her wrist, roughly, more than I should have. But I didn't care. If I didn't drag her away, they'd rip her apart. "Come," I hissed, yanking her upright. Their mocking carried after us as I forced her through the narrow alleyways, heads turning, mouths curling into sneers, as if our suffering was their entertainment. I didn't stop until the crowd thinned and the rotting outline of our hut appeared against the snow-gray horizon. The door creaked when I shoved it open. A draft immediately bit through, cutting to the bone. Inside, the place was as broken as our lives. A sagging roof patched with old hides, gaps between the warped planks where the wind whistled like a ghost, and the smell of damp earth rising from the packed floor. Our meager fire had died hours ago, nothing but ash and cold stone in the hearth. One stool, a pallet stuffed with straw that flattened under the weight of sleep, a cracked clay bowl left on the table with only the smear of last night's porridge clinging to it. That was all we had. I shoved my mother down onto the stool and turned on her, my voice sharp. "Why didn't you fight back? Why do you let them do this to you?" Her eyes, weary and sorrowful, lifted to me, and in them I saw not fear, but the same cursed blue as mine. I paced the cramped space, my blood still hot, my cheek throbbing where the stone had landed. "You kneel like some beaten dog, Mother. You let them spit on you, throw stones at you, call you a witch." "I am no witch," she snapped, her voice breaking through the draft like a crack of thunder. Her hands, raw from the cold, slammed the table where her bundles of dried herbs lay. "These are not spells, Kaelen. They are remedies. Medicines. I grind bark for fevers, roots for bleeding wounds, leaves that soothe the lungs. But they will not see it." I snarled, my fists tight at my sides. "Because you hide in shadows. Because you whisper your secrets instead of shouting the truth." Her eyes, those same cursed pale blue as mine, flared with sudden fire. "And what would shouting have earned me, When men do not want truth, only fear. When they burned my teacher alive before my eyes, a man who healed kings with his knowledge of the body." Her voice cracked, low but sharp as ice. "I fled with his books clutched to my chest, fled because I was carrying you." Her words hit harder than any stone. I froze. "Carrying me." Her gaze drifted to the flames that weren't there, her voice quieter now, bitter. "Not by choice. You need not know more." Her fingers trembled as she reached for the herbs, stroking them as though they might comfort her. "But I would not let you die inside me. I would not let them take the only good I had left." I swallowed hard, anger warring with a shame I didn't want to feel. "So now I'm the mark. The cursed eyes, the bastard they see as proof of your sins." She looked at me then, fierce despite the shadows under her skin. "You are not cursed. You are alive. That is the only miracle that matters. My science, my knowledge, kept you breathing when they would rather you drowned. Do not despise me for that." My hands trembled, curling into fists. I wanted to scream at her, to hate her for dragging me into this world of scorn and hunger. But I couldn't, not with the way she looked at me, as if I was the only reason she still fought to wake each morning. I threw my hands up, pacing the narrow hut. "You can't sit here hiding. They'll—" The door banged open before I could finish, snow and wind gusting inside. Boots scuffed the floor, the smell of iron and wet fur filling the room. My heart slammed against my ribs. "Kaelen," my mother warned, but her voice didn't hide the worry. 3 soldiers stepped inside, their axes glinting under the dim light. Behind them slithered Minister Hallvard, his greasy hair slicked back, eyes glinting with malice. I recognized that smug sneer. He'd hated me before I could even walk, hated my mother for daring to defy him with her knowledge. "Bring her," Hallvard hissed, his voice smooth like oil over gravel. "The king will hear of her crimes. Witchcraft, consorting with spirits, endangering the people." I stepped in front of her, chest tight. "She is no witch. You're a liar. You have no proof." Hallvard's grin widened. "Proof? Oh, child, I need no proof. I have the law. And now, witnesses. You, Kaelen, born of this witch, prove only that she is dangerous." I bristled, claws itching as my temper flared. "I'll fight you before you touch her." My mother raised a hand, calm but deadly. "Kaelen, stop." She moved forward, straightening her back, voice clear as steel. "You will not fight soldiers with anger alone. Stand down and listen. I have faced worse than Hallvard in my life. I survived, and I will survive this too." I shook my head, every muscle screaming. "No, I will not let them drag you away to a cell. Or worse." Hallvard laughed. "You will learn your place, boy." She will be imprisoned and tried, and I will see that neither of you ever trouble the court again. Unless—" He stepped forward. "You're willing to offer me something better?" Bile rose in my throat. Everybody knew what he meant by better. Minister Hallvard was a wicked man who loved to prey on innocent boys who attended the lunar moor. I've resisted his advances until it inflamed him. "Kaelen, if you act in anger, we both lose. But if we survive this, together, we can prove the truth. You must go to the Icefang Citadel. You must beg the king himself," Mother said. I stared at her, disbelief and fear warring in my chest. My throat felt tight, raw. "Go. Beg him." "Yes," she said, gripping my arm, "or I will burn. And nothing you do here will save me. Now move." "Take her," Minister Hallvard snapped. The soldiers advanced, and I watched them take her. My mother's life was on the line, and if I didn't do something, there would be nothing left of her, or me. Chapter 2. Kaelen. The village melted behind me like smoke. I ran, snow crunching under my boots, mud spraying across my soaked legs, heart hammering against my ribs like it wanted out. Every shout from the villagers, every clanging boot of soldiers behind me chased me forward. But I hit a wall almost immediately. I couldn't get inside the gates. Guards flooded every entrance, soldiers lining every archway, axes gleaming like teeth in the snow. I skidded to a stop, chest heaving, fists clenched. Desperation clawed at me. I could almost hear my mother screaming in my mind, burning under the pyre's weight. There was no way in. No way. Until an old woman appeared from the shadows of a narrow alley. "Child," she rasped, voice like dried leaves. "The doors are barred, and the soldiers are too many. You will not enter as they expect. Follow me." I didn't hesitate. She led me down a narrow, winding alley, her hand clutching mine like it could hold back fate itself. Soon we arrived at a gritty tunnel beneath the castle, its walls slick with moss and rot, the air heavy and foul. "Climb when you must," she said, pointing to a faint iron grate above us. "And when you do, look to the star. The star will guide you." I nodded, though I didn't understand, only knew I had no other choice. My fingers scraped raw on the stones as I crawled, knees cutting against the mud. Finally, I came to a dark waterway, a sewer running beneath the castle. I waded through the freezing muck, stench burning my nostrils. When I dared to look up, I saw it, an iron star, glinting faintly in the darkness above, a single point of light. Heart hammering, I wriggled, clawed, shoved myself upward. My arms shook, legs numb, but finally, I breached the castle above. I fell forward into a room, gasping, the smell of roses and something richer, milk, warm and creamy, stinging my senses. My boots splashed in shallow water. Candlelight reflected off petals floating in the bath, soft as blood on snow. And then I saw him. On the bed, pale as winter ice, blonde hair spilling over the pillows, lips parted in eternal sleep. An Omega. Dead. Poisoned. I stumbled back, horror striking me cold, nausea threatening to overtake me. His beauty was almost cruel, so delicate, so soft, so wrong. My stomach twisted. How could someone so beautiful be taken like this? I swallowed, hand trembling, and whispered, more to myself than anyone else, "No. No. Not him. Not like this. Not anyone else." The bath of roses, the milk, the careful, loving preparation. Someone had meant to celebrate this Omega. Someone had killed him anyway. And somehow, some dark, twisted part of me knew this was only the beginning. A knock at the door made my throat seize. I froze, eyes glued to the pale, lifeless Omega on the bed. My hands shook as I grabbed a tattered blanket, yanking it over him, closing his eyes gently. My heart raced so fast it felt like it would burst through my chest. "Are you dressed? Madam, you must not keep the king waiting," a voice called from the hallway, sharp and impatient. I cursed under my breath, cheeks burning, and stumbled. My fingers fumbled with the ties of my coat, tugging it off as fast as I could. I didn't even stop to think. I threw myself toward the bath, warm water swirling with rose petals and milk, steam curling around me like a veil. The door burst open. A flurry of ladies-in-waiting stormed in, gasps and whispers bouncing off the marble walls. I kept my face down, hair plastered to my forehead, body trembling, trying desperately to disappear into the water. One of them, a stern woman with a hard stare, didn't speak immediately. Instead, she just watched me, her eyes scanning my hair matted with mud, my skin streaked and raw from scrubbing in the sewers, my clothes tattered and soaked. Finally, she muttered, her voice a whip. "Why are you so filthy?" I flinched. The tunnel. My words died on my lips as she cut me off, shaking her head. "You cannot enter the king like this. Do you have any idea how disgraceful you look? Your hair, black, gray, muddied, it is not acceptable. Your skin, raw and bleeding, you must scrub until it shines." I bit back a curse, my face burning, eyes still fixed on the bathwater. I felt trapped, humiliated, panicked, and desperate. Every instinct screamed to run, to hide, but I knew I couldn't. Not if I wanted a chance to save my mother. I scrubbed, hands raw, water swirling pink and white with petals and milk, the stinging cuts only adding to the fire of fear and shame curling in my chest. Every second, the thought of the king waiting grew heavier, pressing down like ice on my spine. Even as I forced myself out of the bath, dripping and trembling, she didn't leave my side. The maid, stern, unforgiving, watched every motion, hands on her hips, eyes sharp as daggers. "Lift your chin! Straighten your back. Do not slouch like a beggar," she barked, her voice cutting through the quiet of the chamber. I swallowed hard, cheeks burning, fumbling as she handed me the robes. The fabric was unlike anything I had ever touched, smooth, heavy, and impossibly warm. Royal blue, deep and almost liquid in color, with gold thread woven intricately along the seams. The embroidery shimmered when I moved, twisting into delicate patterns of stars and curling snowflakes. I wanted to admire it, to revel in its beauty, but I couldn't. My head stayed down, my fingers clutching the edges like a lifeline. "Straighten your shoulders, boy. Do you want to collapse before the king lays eyes on you?" I flinched at the barked words but obeyed, forcing my spine rigid. Every step through the corridors was agony. The hallways stretched endlessly, cold stone walls gleaming under torchlight. I could hear the shuffle of my own boots against the polished floors, every echo a reminder that I did not belong here. "Watch your step. Do not drag your robes," she scolded again. My feet stumbled slightly over the hem, and she slapped my shoulder. Not hard, but enough to make me gasp. The robe clung to me, heavy yet strangely empowering, brushing over my arms and legs as if it were alive. Gold threads caught the torchlight in sharp, glittering flashes, and I felt like the robe was mocking me, showing me the grandeur I would never feel inside. I kept my eyes down, chest tight, and swallowed back panic. One wrong move, one tilt of my head, and the entire court, my life, my mission, would unravel. Yet still the maid didn't stop her scolding. "Lift your chin. Shoulders back. You are not a street urchin, boy. You are a royal bride. Act like it, or the king will notice your insolence before he even sets eyes on you." My stomach turned, and I realized with a jolt, I wasn't just here to look right. Every stitch, every fold of these royal robes was a performance, and failure could cost far more than humiliation. We emerged into the hall, and my blood froze. The great polar bear hall towered before me, a cathedral carved from ice and stone. Vaulted ceilings glittered with icicle chandeliers, scattering fractured light across the carved walls. Massive banners hung from the rafters, each emblazoned with the sigils of the 4 great polar bear clans: Frostfang, Iceblood, Glacierpaw, and Snowmane. Their centuries of pride and power pressed down on me like a glacier on my chest. The floor was lined with crystal pillars and ice-carved statues of past kings, their lifeless eyes seeming to mock my audacity. Torches flared along the walls, flickering across the nobles' faces. Every gaze in the hall, every one of the 4 clans' eyes, locked on me, heavy with curiosity, suspicion, and judgment. And then the priest's voice cut through the air, smooth and ringing. "Let the union of the king be made complete." The bride, Alaric of the Glacier Paw line. My stomach dropped. Alaric. The name, the bath, the petals, the milk, the delicate preparation, it had all been for Alaric, the dead Omega I had found. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to scream, to collapse, but I couldn't. Not yet. Not when my mother's life hung in the balance. I froze, face burning, hands clenching at my sides. The noble's eyes burned into me, the weight of centuries of polar bear pride pressing down like iron. I didn't move, didn't speak. Every second, my pulse thundered in my ears, and I could feel the threads of fate tightening around me. Somewhere at the far end of the hall, a shadow shifted, and then I saw him. The king, Ericur. He moved with the slow, precise grace of a predator, eyes like glaciers, sharp and cold, scanning the hall, until they landed on me. And in that instant, every breath in my body froze. I knew I had only one chance to speak, to save my mother. But I didn't know if I would live long enough to even get the words out.
Chapter 3. The Bear. Ericur. The hall smelled of polished stone and burning torches, but it didn't reach me. Nothing did. The winter festival was supposed to be a celebration, but all I felt was hollow. The echo of a knife, where the last Omega had pressed it against my neck. A dagger. A blade like a needle. Alaric. His eyes wild. The gash still throbbed, a reminder that even kings bleed. I sat on the throne, hands resting lightly on the carved arms, letting the banners of my ancestors flicker in the torchlight. Frost Fang, Ice Blood, Glacier Paw, Snowmane. All their eyes would be on me tonight. They expected perfection. They expected fire. They expected me to care. My loyal advisor, a scrawny little thing with a beard that seemed to have its own heartbeat, knelt beside me. His voice droned like a dry stream. "Your Majesty, the match is exceptional. Glacier Paw lineage is remarkably fertile, as you know. Alaric is—" I didn't even bother looking at him. "Yes, I know he's fertile. You've told me 3 times already today, and yesterday, and during the last moon." He nodded eagerly, as if I'd said something witty. "Indeed, and the mating. Oh, the mating potential is exquisite. Your union could produce—" I lifted a hand and waved it vaguely, like swatting a fly. "Yes, thrilling. I'm practically quivering with anticipation." His eyes went wide, as if I'd just sworn in a cathedral. "But, Your Majesty, surely—" "Swat," I muttered under my breath. "Fly." The words tasted bitter. Fertility, mating, union. None of it mattered. Not really. Not anymore. I had seen too much. I'd survived wars, blood on snow, betrayal that tasted like iron, and yet here I sat, listening to this little man gush about a dead Omega, as if he were a prize stallion. Alaric. That name. Even now, it made the scar on my neck throb, reminding me that the last time I trusted an Omega, it had cost blood. My control. And still, here I was, expected to perform, to care, to mate, to smile like the dutiful Winter King. I wanted to throw the little man out the nearest window, but that would be messy, and I liked my windows intact. Instead, I let him ramble. Let him celebrate Alaric's fertility. Let him assume I would do as expected, because in a moment, everything about this festival, every expectation, every banner, every goddamn gleaming torch, would be turned on its head, and I would not be ready for it. The hall buzzed with expectation, banners fluttering, torchlight flickering against ice-carved walls. I sat in my throne, shoulders rigid, letting my advisors drone on about fertility, lineage, and the virtues of Glacier Paw blood. Their voices were background noise, tedious, like the hum of flies I could swat away if I weren't king, and then he appeared. The bride. He walked in as his name echoed through the hall, soft steps against polished stone. My eyes caught him instantly. Hair almost white, pale as the first frost, brushing over shoulders that moved with fluid, trembling grace. Eyes like frost-tipped ice, sharp and luminous, fixed somewhere ahead of him, but not on me. I should have felt something. Pride, command, control. Instead, I felt my chest tighten in a way I hadn't in years, a stir of something dangerous and unfamiliar. His beauty was blinding, almost cruel in its perfection. Enough to make a king, long practiced in maintaining a dead heart, suddenly aware of it. My lips curved into a line, dry humor threatening to escape. I wanted to tell my advisor to shut up, to stop babbling about mating potential and the glorious union of Glacier Paw blood. I didn't. I couldn't. Not while all 4 great clans, Frostfang, Iceblood, Glacier Paw, and Snowmane, watched, calculating every heartbeat, every twitch. Vultures circling, waiting for a misstep. The Omega moved forward, robe brushing the floor, shoulders rigid despite his fear, or perhaps because of it. I leaned back in the throne, letting my gaze take him in fully. Everything about him defied caution and protocol. Yet something inside me, some cold, buried pulse, forced attention, made me notice, made me wait. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know why he had chosen this moment, this hall, this throne to enter. But I did know one thing. Tonight, nothing would be as it should. And for the first time in a long time, the Winter King felt unsettled. The ceremony began with the slow toll of crystal bells echoing through the great polar bear hall. The priest intoned words I barely registered, talking about union, duty, lineage, and other tedious things designed to bore an alpha king into polite compliance. The bride, the Omega, approached, and he did something completely unacceptable. He refused to look at me, not the usual submissive, trembling glance I was accustomed to from Omegas. Shoulders tight, drawn up like he expected a blow, eyes darting around the hall, scanning, calculating. An assassin? Probably. Wouldn't be the first one to try to charm me with a blade hidden beneath silk. I signaled subtly to the Black Fangs, my elite guard. Fingers barely twitching, but they knew. Draw swords if ready. Silent, lethal, poised. I carried knives everywhere myself. If this Omega tried something, he'd find a steel blade in his belly, instead of the kind of swords he preferred. The priest droned on. Do you, bride, vow to... I ignored the words, eyes locked on him. Every noble in the hall stared as well, the 4 clans holding their collective breath. Frostfang, Iceblood, Glacier Paw, Snowmane, all watching, weighing, calculating. I arched an eyebrow. Well? I murmured under my breath. The priest repeated the question, louder. My gaze flicked to the Omega again. Still, he didn't speak. The silence stretched, dragging through the hall like ice across stone. Murmurs rippled along the back rows of nobles, but no one dared break the ceremony. I suppressed a smirk, typical. Not the usual trembling, clinging Omega. Not the usual yes, Your Majesty. No, this one had audacity, or stupidity, or both. Speak, I said. quiet, almost dry. Just enough for the hall to catch it. The black fangs shifted imperceptibly, blades glinting. All eyes turned toward the bride. And still, nothing. Not a word, not a sound. The hall hung on the edge of a knife. And I realized, slowly, that this was going to be far more interesting than I'd anticipated. Finally, the bride's voice cut through the hall, trembling but audible. I do. A murmur rippled through the nobles, but the priest nodded, clearly relieved. Then, by the power vested in me, I didn't wait for the rest. I rose, slowly, deliberately. The room seemed to shrink under my height. A king, tall as a cypress tree, filling every corner of the hall with the weight of winter itself. Black hair tumbled over my shoulders, and the scars, railroad tracks across my face, reminders of blood spilled and battles survived, caught the torchlight. I was every inch the predator this hall expected me to be. I stepped forward, and the black fangs instinctively parted, forming a subtle corridor, blades glinting, ready. The bride froze, shoulders tight, eyes wide. I saw him flinch slightly under my gaze, an almost imperceptible shiver, but he didn't break. Good. Audacity or stupidity, I wasn't sure yet. I let my eyes roam over him, taking in every detail. Small, fragile-looking, robe shimmering royal blue with gold interwoven along the seams, pale hair like frost. Eyes, frost-tipped ice, sharp, darting, alert. He was tense, too tense, and I liked it. Probably thinking me a mountain he could never climb. Probably right. Do you understand the vows you have just spoken? I asked, voice low, carrying the weight of steel and snow. Yes, he whispered, barely audible, eyes flicking up for the first time. Good, I said, because you will find I am not forgiving of mistakes. The priest cleared his throat, continuing the ceremony, but my attention never left him. Every motion, every tremor of his fingers, every glance he tried to hide, I catalogued it. He was nothing like the usual Omega. Bold, defiant, dangerous, and beautiful enough to make a long-dead heart almost stir. I took another step closer, and the hall seemed to hold its breath. Nobles shifted uneasily. The black fang's hands hovered near their hilts. The frost in the air itself seemed to sharpen, waiting for the storm I could feel building between us. And I realized, for the first time in years, that this wedding would not be about ceremony, or lineages, or alliances. It would be about him, and the threat, challenge, and fire he brought in his pale, defiant gaze. Chapter 4. The Bear. Eriker. I watched him. Across the long hall, through flickering torchlight and the chatter of nobles, I watched the bride, the Omega, move with all the wrong manners, or maybe all the right ones, depending on the angle. His maid flinched with barely concealed fury at every misstep. How he didn't sit straight enough, how he barely touched his food, how he breathed like a living, thinking being instead of a docile ornament. I allowed myself a faint smirk. A king is supposed to command, yes, but a little chaos, like this, was infinitely more entertaining than polite compliance. I felt eyes on me, not just the nobles, not just the clans, but everyone sensing the predator, watching the prey. And I didn't care. From the far side, Glacier Paw's Duke approached. Emerald and silver robes trimmed with frost-white fur, boots polished to a mirror shine, a jewel-studded chain resting across his chest. Every step precise, deliberate, like a serpent gliding over ice.
He stopped beside me, voice low, smooth as silk. Is my son of your liking?
I allowed my gaze to drift to the bride. Then I spoke, calm, deliberate. Look at him, I said, voice cutting through the murmurs of the hall. Those eyes, bright blue, almost as pale as frost itself. I've never seen Glacier Paw blood like this.
The Duke blinked, squinting, then followed my gaze. By the gods, I don't remember my son. His words faltered as the realization struck him. The boy's eyes glimmered unnaturally, piercing, unnerving. Even from here, even at a distance, the Duke sensed something different, something off.
The boy, oblivious or fearless, didn't meet our eyes. His shoulders tensed, movements tight and measured, but there was no fear. I let the corner of my mouth twitch. Interesting, audacious, dangerous. I rose slowly, letting the weight of my height and presence fill the hall. My robes of royal blue, trimmed with gold, shifted around me like a living thing. I'm pleased, I said, voice low, sharp, echoing over the hushed crowd. I will bread him tonight. Now.
Now, the Duke sputtered, his voice cracking like ice underfoot. Now, I repeated, letting the single word hang in the hall like a blade. The boy froze, a faint catch of breath. Shoulders tight, eyes darting. I smiled inwardly, dry as frost. This would be very entertaining. And the court waited, suspended between tradition, fear, and the storm brewing between us. The music stopped. Everything stopped. The chatter, the clinking of goblets, even the flicker of torchlight seemed to pause as I lifted a hand. I signaled to them. Bring my bride. A ripple of whispers swept through the hall. That king. Mindless brute. Has he no manners? Poor thing. He'll be split open in no time. Bred for sure. Beyond recognition. Brute. Cold. Merciless. I let them talk. Let the words roll over me like ice against stone. Most of them feared I'd crush an assassin in my midst. Or worse. Fine. If there was one, better to get it over with quickly. The black fangs glided forward, silent as shadows, parting the crowd. Every noble held their breath. Every clan waited, calculating. I let the silence stretch, letting it thicken, until the bride's pale, frost-tipped eyes met mine, just for a heartbeat. We will retire, I said, voice low, sharp, absolute. The whispers continued behind me, muffled now, but I didn't care. Tonight, no one would talk about anything but survival and obedience, and I knew the night would not end quietly. I led him to my bedroom. Before the door even closes, I'm on him, kissing him hard, rough, ruthless, tearing into him, ripping at the fabric of his robes with impatient fingers. He cries out in shock, thrashing and pushing back. Good. I like it when they struggle. My hands grip his chin, forcing his gaze up to mine, and I see it. Those eyes, pale, frost-tipped, burning with unrelenting fire. I should be in control, but already something in me is awakening, clawing, roaring to life after 100 years of frozen silence. And then he spits, straight on my cheek. I freeze for a heartbeat, stunned, and then I laugh. Dark, savage, enraged. The taste of him, defiance on his tongue, sets something feral loose inside me. Something ugly. Something I haven't felt in centuries. I want him bent. Broken. I grab his chin again, so hard he flinches back, a sharp cry tearing from his throat. "Who are you?" "Speak," I bark, letting the alpha command roll through the room, through the very air. I see it. The hitch of his breath, the stutter of his lashes, the tiny shiver that betrays his fire. He must tell me. He will. Kaelen, son of Solvier of the Frostfang line. And just like that, the ice around my heart shatters. The Winter King, long cold, long dead to desire and rage, awakens. Every muscle taut, every instinct roaring, every scar a map of battles won and lost. And now, I've found a fight worth everything. I want to kiss him again, taste my sin again. But that name claws at me. Solvier of the Frostfang line. Mother's kin. Witches, all of them. Burnt to ashes in my nightmares. I grip him harder, forcing him onto the bed. His breaths come fast, shallow. Clothes torn, collarbone pale as milk, chest heaving beneath my fingers. My robes come undone in frantic, impatient strips, desire throbbing like wildfire through my veins. I care for none of it, imposter. I growl, voice rough, primal. You will service your king. I will do no such thing, he spits back, nostrils flaring. You come near me with that thing, and I will bite it off. Grit. Defiance. I like it. The most interesting thing that's happened all day. Not if I hold you down, I chuckle. Cold. Dangerous. As my fingers dig into his arms. I can be of service to you. I can see into the future. I can help you win wars. Help me. Help us. Please, for the love of Ventera, please. The name lights a fire in me, hotter than anything I've felt in a century. Rage explodes, untamed, burning through my veins. My hand shoots up, clutching his throat, steel and ice and fury all at once. Where did you hear that name? I roar, eyes blazing, every inch of me awakened, alive, furious. I will say nothing, the Omega wheezed, chest heaving, eyes blazing. Help me! Help my mother, or you and your house will perish along with her. A great shadow befalls you, my king. It comes for all of us. The words hit me like a hammer, ice and fire tearing through my chest. The torches flickered, shadows stretching long and jagged across the walls. I felt it, a presence, unseen, creeping, hungry. The hall seemed to shrink, the air heavy, suffocating. I gritted my teeth, fury and fear warring inside me. This was no mere child's plea. This was a prophecy, a warning, a curse whispered across centuries. And yet, I was the Winter King. I would face it. I would crush it. I would bend it to me. But even as I moved, my heart thrummed with a cold, raw certainty. The night had only just begun, and nothing in the world would survive untouched.
Chapter 5. Kaelen. I hadn't meant to be mated. This was a mistake. A mistake I couldn't seem to regret. The king was massive, his sheer bulk eclipsing the window. He loomed over me like a great shadow, black hair brushing his shoulders, his gaze fierce beneath the tangle, and day-old stubble roughening a handsome, scarred jaw. He was every bit the bear they whispered about. And yet, my heart quivered. What do you mean? His voice was nothing more than timber. I still remembered the taste of him on my lips, how right it had felt, how much I hadn't wanted it to stop. A flush crept over my cheeks despite myself. Your Majesty, Who are you? Speak. His voice cracked like thunder. Another assassin? Is that it? Have you come to kill me? The shadows moved around us, stretching, reaching closer as if they belonged to him. I wasn't foolish enough not to know of the Polar Bear King's might. They said he could bring 1,000 winters with the thought that his cold heart was the reason spring had not touched these lands for centuries. And I saw it, felt it. The withered tree of his essence, its roots buried in eternal frost. He was in agony, even if he'd never admit it. And God's help me, I ached to heal him, to thaw him, but now wasn't the time. Please, it was a mistake. My words tumbled out, frantic. The Omega you were supposed to marry, he's dead. I didn't kill him, but I need your help to save my mother, please. A hand shot out, iron hard, clamping around my throat. You speak of witchery. His eyes blazed, his grip unrelenting. The same witches that were banished from these lands centuries ago after my assassination. I thrashed, gasping, clawing at his wrist. Not witchery, science, to heal the sick, to help the poor. Please. Guards! His roar rattled the stone walls. They bled from the shadows as if they had always been there. The black fangs. Silent, hulking, their armor cold as ice. Take him to the dungeons, the king ordered, his voice like the crack of a glacier breaking. His hand released me, and I collapsed, choking on air. Investigate the matter thoroughly, he added, and for the first time, I understood why they called him the Winter King. The guards dragged me through the twisting corridors, my boots scraping stone, my wrists bruised beneath their iron grip. My pleas echoed off the frozen walls, but no one listened. Not one soul dared look at me, much less help me. The dungeon reeked of damp stone and rust. Chains rattled in the dark as I was hurled into a cell. My body hit the icy floor with a crack that jarred through my bones. The door slammed shut, its clang rolling like thunder down the corridor. I curled forward, clutching my throat where his hand had been, the imprint of the Winter King still burning into my skin. Fear gnawed at me, sharp as knives. My mother. Every heartbeat was one heartbeat closer to her trial, closer to her death. I could see it. Her small figure bound at the pyre, flames licking her skirts while the crowd screamed for a witch's blood. My stomach twisted so hard I gagged, but I forced myself to breathe, forced myself to think. Solveir of the Frostfang line. I had used that name with purpose. I knew its weight, knew what it meant. It wasn't just blood. It was the king's mother's kin, the family he had once clung to before the crown turned him to ice. Everyone knew how much he had favored her, how the whispers claimed she was the only soul he'd ever loved, and if I could stoke even a spark of that memory, I could win my way out of here. I sat back against the wall, the cold biting through my torn clothes, and lifted my chin. The dungeon swallowed me whole, but I would not break. Not here. Not yet. For my mother, I would fight. For myself, I would survive. And for the Winter King, I would find the crack in his frost and force it open, even if it killed me. 2 days. I sat in the dark of the dungeons for 2 days, barely eating, barely sleeping. My body ached from the cold, my mind from the weight of fear. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother on her knees before the pyre, flames reaching for her. I couldn't shake it. Then the door groaned open, my heart slammed into my throat. He filled the doorway like a shadow torn from some nightmare, massive shoulders draped in a black cloak, robes of the finest furs, royal blue lined with gold that shimmered faintly even in the torchlight. The king. No. The bear. So... His voice was a low timbre that made my knees tremble. The false bride's story checks out. The body of Alaric of the Glacierpaw line has been found, poisoned upon investigation. And you? A near look-alike peasant took his place. He strolled inside, each step deliberate, regal. I swallowed hard. "Yes," I whispered. Naturally, Glacier Paw's Duke is beside himself with grief. His cold eyes landed on me, sharp as knives. "And now the question is—" He paused, savoring it. "What do we do with the false bride?" I scrambled forward, desperation clawing at my chest. "Your Majesty, I never meant to deceive you, but my mother is in grave danger. Please, she isn't a witch. She sees things, yes, but she can help you." "I don't need the help of a witch," the king sneered. His lip curled, voice thunderous. "What I need is someone to tell the freaking truth for once." Spit flew with the force of it. His hand slammed the bars, rattling them. "Curse the Omega race! Is there not one among you who is kind, honest, or decent?" My back stiffened. The words tore from me before I could stop them. "I did what I had to do to survive." My voice cracked with anger, my throat raw. "You would have done the same. Anyone would have. Yes, I lied, but does that mean I'm not kind, not decent? Or are you telling me if the tables were turned, you wouldn't have done everything to protect the one you love?" His stare cut through me like a blade. And then he laughed, a deep, brutal sound that echoed off the dungeon walls. "You lie to the king and have the gall to justify it," he said, almost with relish. "Oh, you are like no other I've seen at court." He turned sharply, his cloak flaring like wings of shadow. "Come then, false bride. We will annul this treachery at once," and with a sweep of his robes, he left in a flurry, leaving the door open and the air frozen in his wake. I barely had time to think before the guards descended. Rough hands lifted me, dragging me from the dungeon into blinding light. My clothes were torn, my skin still raw from the cold, and my struggles. They stripped me without ceremony, tossing me into a steaming bath. The water burned and soothed all at once, scented with oils I couldn't name, and for a brief, fleeting moment, I felt human again. They washed me as if I were an offering, scrubbing at my hair, my skin, until every inch of me was pale, almost glowing. Then food, bland and warm, shoved into my hands. I ate because I had to, because if I didn't, I'd collapse before the king. Finally, they dressed me. Robes of pure white, the fabric heavy with golden weaving, catching the light with every step I was forced to take. I felt like a sacrificial lamb walking toward slaughter. And then they made me kneel. The court loomed around me like a forest of jagged teeth. The nobles perched in their high seats, their eyes sharp, hungry, predatory. Every whisper cut like a blade. The 4 great polar bear clans, Frostfang, Glacier Paw, Ironclaw, and Snowmane, watched, silent waiting. I was exposed, small and completely at their mercy. The high priest stood near the throne, his robes crimson and black, hands folded, face solemn. The king sat above all of them, dark and immense, his shadow stretching like winter across the hall. Every muscle in my body screamed, but I could do nothing but kneel. "My marriage," the king's voice cut through the hall, deep and commanding, "is null and void. This false bride shall be unmade." A hush fell, but not of obedience, more of anticipation. The court waited, their fangs hidden behind smiles, their claws concealed in velvet. The high priest's eyes lifted slowly, calm as ice, yet unyielding. "Your Majesty." His voice rolled like a glacier, deliberate, unbroken. No mortal hand may undo what the gods have witnessed. The law is older than the crown, older than this hall. Once a bond is made under their sight, it is eternal. The marriage cannot be annulled, not for you, not for anyone. A ripple of whispers ran through the court like wind over frozen plains. My knees shook. Eternal. Binding. The king's jaw tightened, his fingers curled around the arms of his throne. This law, this madness. Do you deny the king his will? "I deny no king," the priest said evenly, "but the gods deny what you ask." The bond stands, unbroken. The marriage is yours, and yours alone, until the end of your days. I dared a glance at the king. His face was a storm, black clouds rolling over frozen peaks, thunder threatening to crack the hall. His eyes found mine, and I saw disbelief, fury, and something darker, something feral that made my pulse spike. I swallowed hard. My fate, and my mother's, had just been sealed, witnessed by the Winter King, the court, and the gods themselves. They forced me to my feet, my legs trembling beneath me. Every step felt like wading through ice. When I reached the king's side, I lowered myself into the seat beside him. My entire body shook, part fear, part adrenaline, part the raw awareness of the king's presence so close, so immense. The court's eyes burned into me like hot iron. Whispers rippled through the seats, some curious, some cruel, some hungry. I felt as though I were some creature they had stepped in and had no choice but to display before the kingdom. The high priest cleared his throat, his hands lifting to the air with ceremonial grace. Before we proceed, let divination reveal the truth of this union. Gasps echoed through the hall as the priest's fingers traced intricate patterns in the air, golden light tracing the lines of his spell. Eyes flicked to me and back to the king, growing wider with each heartbeat. By the gift of the Ancient Ones, the priest intoned, I see bloodlines hidden, truth veiled in shadow. This Omega is not as he seems. He is born of noble blood, though obscured, and fate has placed him here for reasons beyond mortal comprehension. Murmurs exploded into shocked whispers, the court abuzz with disbelief. The Frostfangs, the Glacier Paws, the Iron Claws, even the Snowmanes, every clan sat rigid, astonished. None of them had expected this revelation. I swallowed hard, feeling my pulse spike, my mind racing. My secret, my carefully chosen lie, the Frostfang name, the tie to the king's mother's kin, had worked. And now the priest, with his rare gift, had exposed it, forcing the court to see what I had hidden. I was no ordinary Omega. The king's gaze bore into me, black as midnight, measuring, dangerous, unreadable. Every instinct screamed that this was a turning point, not just for me, but for him. And perhaps, just perhaps, for the shadowed fate of my mother as well. The whispers didn't die down. They swirled like snow in a blizzard, but for the first time in hours, or maybe years, I felt a spark of hope. The game had begun.
Chapter 6. The Bear. Eriker. The moment the priest spoke, the air in the hall seemed to shift. I had faced assassins, traitors, and fools who would call themselves nobles, but none had ever dared to stand this close to me and survive. And yet, this Omega, kneeling before me, trembled with something I could not name. Noble blood. The words burned my ears and sent a shiver down my spine. I'd seen many things in my time, wars, betrayals, deaths, but this was new. A peasant? No. Born of noble blood, obscured and hidden. How many lies had I been told in this court? How many fakes paraded as the true heirs? And yet, somehow, this one held the weight of truth hidden in his trembling form. I could feel the court's eyes on me, each whisper a needle pricking my pride. Frostfangs, Glacier Paws, Iron Claws, Snowmanes, they all waited for me to respond, to crush this mockery before it took root. I should have spat in the Omega's face and thrown him from the hall. Instead, I found my eyes drawn to his. Pale blue, eyes like the first frost of winter, sharp and clear and cold. I could not look away. The priest's words sank deeper, revealing that my assumptions had been wrong, that this Omega, the false bride, was more than he seemed. My mother, the blood connection, Solvier, the Frostfang line. I had thought the past dead and buried, ashes swept into memory, and yet here, alive, hidden in this trembling creature, it resurfaced. I rose from the throne, the weight of my bulk filling the hall, commanding the silence I demanded. Every muscle in me tensed, a predator assessing prey, and something more. Curiosity, dangerous and bitter. I needed to know what this Omega was capable of, what secrets he carried. The black guard shifted behind me, silent and unwavering. My hand itched for a sword, though not for him. Not yet. He was mine, in law and in blood, whether he knew it or not. And still, my heart, or what passed for it, stirred. I had ruled winters. I'd conquered enemies. I'd watched men and women die by the thousands. And yet, the sight of this one, small, defiant creature trembling at my side ignited something primal in me. Rage, hunger, curiosity, all tangled into a storm I had not felt in a century. I took a step closer to him, and the murmurs in the hall grew quieter, replaced by a suffocating anticipation. Every noble, every courtier, every black fang felt it. The Winter King had been awakened in a way he had not allowed for 100 years, and I was not yet sure whether I wanted to destroy him or claim him. I was just beginning to relax, if one can ever call it that, when I spotted Vlarius slithering toward him. Black dew-claws serpent of a noblewoman, all smiles and silk, a predator hiding behind false sweetness. "Oh, your majesty," she cooed, bowing low to me with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. Of course it didn't. "May I speak with the bride?" Such courage, such poise. One could almost forget he is but a fledgling among bears. My teeth clenched. Poise, fledgling, the nerve, the way her lips curled, the soft tilt of her head. It made my skin crawl, and not in a pleasant way. My sister has always hated me. She thought I was an incompetent ruler since I never left the castle. I knew. She was gunning for my throne. Kaelen, oblivious to my irritation, gave a tight-lipped nod. She began to circle him, soft compliments spilling from her like venom-coated honey. "You stand so proudly, despite your unfortunate circumstances. One could see the king's favor written all over you, couldn't they?" I moved, fast. 2 long strides, and I was beside them, my shadow engulfing her. Enough. Vlaria's smile didn't falter, but there was a flicker of calculation in her eyes. "Your Majesty, I meant no. Save it," I said, my voice low and lethal. "Step away from him. Now." The court watched silently, all pretenses of politeness evaporating. Even Kaelen froze. I was ruthless if provoked, and my sister knew that. I grabbed Kaelen's arm, not roughly, but firmly enough that he could not escape, and began walking him back toward his chambers. Vlaria trailed for a moment, her mouth opening and closing, like a fish out of water, then wisely melted back into the shadows. The halls were emptying as we passed. I could feel the heat of Kaelen's glare on me, and for a second, I allowed myself a wry thought. Good. Scared straight. He should be. Finally, we reached his room. I stopped in the doorway, looking down at him. "You are mine to protect," I said, voice low, carrying all the menace and warning I could muster. "And I will not have anyone, especially not vultures in silk, crawling near you." He opened his mouth, likely to argue, but I silenced him with a look. Not a threatening one. Well, maybe a little, but enough to let him know that any defiance would be costly. "You may stay," I said, stepping aside. "For now." Kaelen's shoulders relaxed fractionally, but I could still see the fire in his eyes, the defiance, the edge that made him interesting and dangerous. Good, I thought, letting the door close behind us. I like dangerous. I turned toward my chambers, eager to retreat to silence and thought, only to find her waiting for me. Her eyes were as a spear, cold as the northern wind. Velarie. My irritation flared immediately. "You think you can walk away, Winter King?" she hissed. "Do you really think that Omega is yours to coddle? Do you really think you can indulge weakness?" Every word dug into the scar on my neck, the knife's cruel path from the last time I'd trusted an Omega. Memories of betrayal flashed, sharp, burning, endless. My fingers twitched, but I forced calm. "I have no interest in—" "You will have interest," she cut me off. "Do you even remember what's at stake? The marriage must be consummated immediately. Delay in the glacier paws, iron claws, snowmanes, all will see hesitation as weakness. Alliances, influence, entire packs, you risk them all. And don't pretend you are unaware of the ambitions circling this court like vultures, and this person is a nobody." "If it were my will, the marriage would be annulled," I snapped. "Then kill him and be done with it. Besides, you shouldn't have any problems with killing Omegas." I ground my teeth, the heat rising. Her timing, her words, were calculated to touch every wound I carried. She knew exactly which buttons to press. "And I suppose you're here to help me protect the kingdom, by forcing me to bed an Omega I've barely tolerated for 5 minutes. I snapped, dry humor cutting through my anger. Her smile was grim, unsentimental. "Consider it guidance, Your Majesty. For your own good." I bristled. And what good is guidance when it comes wrapped in threats, whispers, and the threat of political ruin? She leaned closer. "Everything has consequences, brother. A single hesitation, and you could lose more than your pride. You could lose your hold on the court, your alliances, even your life." I exhaled, forcing a wry grin. "Bravo. You've managed to ruin my evening, my patience, and apparently my life, all in one swoop. Truly impressive. I only do this because I must, brother. Remember who you are, remember what is at stake, and who your enemies truly are." "Velarie," I spat, the word tasting bitter. "You've never changed." A small smirk, deadly as always. "I'm your sister, Iroker. Never forget it. And I never would. She'd always been jealous of my throne, covetous, but she wasn't wrong. I wasn't the best ruler. I'd held myself captive for over a century, never leaving the tower. It was my fault everything was in disarray, but I couldn't find it in my heart to care."
Chapter 7. Kaelen. The false bride? I was the Queen Omega of all Vintera. I woke in the largest chambers I'd ever slept in. Silk sheets clung to me, smooth against my skin. Skin that was finally clean after what felt like months of filth. For a fleeting second, I almost let myself sink into the comfort. Almost. The door slammed open. In stormed the same maid who had yelled at me the night before, her nose wrinkled like I was something sour. "Up!" she barked, voice sharp enough to cut glass. "No Queen of Vintera lazes about all day. There's work to be done." Her hands were rough, tugging me out of bed and forcing me into another bath, scrubbing until my skin stung. Then came the dressing, layers of fine fabric pressed onto me with all the gentleness of a butcher dressing a carcass. Breakfast followed, stiff and awkward, her breath hot against the back of my neck as though she were waiting for me to choke. The king has requested you receive a proper education. She sniffed. I have a proper education, I snapped. I speak Latin and Greek. Do you speak Thrimheim? The polar bear tongue? No? Then you don't have one. She cut me off, lips curling. My hands tightened on the bread I hadn't touched. Can I see my mother? She's in grave danger. The dungeons... Her face twisted with open disgust. Your mother is a witch, a criminal. You will not speak of her. I bristled, biting back the rage that clawed at my throat. There was nothing I could do. Not yet. They dragged me to the library next, shoving books into my arms. The ministers were waiting, circling like wolves. Every mistake I made, every mispronunciation, was met with the crack of a switch across my knuckles or shoulders. The pain was sharp, relentless. They were worse than Minister Hallvard back home, with his greasy hair and wandering eyes. At least Hallvard leered between blows. These men didn't even blink. No Queen of Vintera, I thought bitterly, staring at the scarlet stripes blooming across my hands. No queen should be treated like this. But I endured. I had to. For her. Nobody at court would speak to me. Not a word, not even a glance unless it was laced with scorn. Every time I stumbled over a phrase in Thrimheim, every time I failed to grasp some twisted piece of etiquette, their eyes burned with cruel delight. I was the false bride, the imposter, the mistake draped in white and gold. Days passed like this, each one heavier than the last, and I was close to breaking, close to begging for an audience with the king. Just one word, just one moment, anything. It was during supper that I overheard it. They've set the trial date, one courtier whispered, sipping wine like blood. Tomorrow, isn't it? The witch burns at dawn. Ah, yes, the false bride's mother. I hear she confessed to speaking with shadows. Not shadows, numbers. Can you believe it? She scribbled them everywhere. Madness, they call it science. A soft chuckle, dry as ash. Science, witchcraft. The line is thin, isn't it? Women shouldn't meddle in such things. Indeed. Better to cut the rot before it spreads. My fork clattered against the plate. Heads turned, whispers flitted like daggers. No, not her. Solvier of the Frostfang line, my mother's bloodline. The same line tied to the king's own mother, decimated by the wrath of a former king who called her brilliance witchcraft. I had seen her work with my own eyes. It wasn't sorcery. It was discovery, revolution. She could heal, she could create, she could change the world. And now they meant to burn her. I sat there, trembling, staring into the flames of the torches along the walls until a plan began to shape itself in my mind. Dangerous, foolish, desperate. But there was no other way. If I could not convince the court, I would convince him. When darkness fell, I returned to my chambers. I waited until the halls grew silent, until even the guards' boots had faded into nothing but echoes. My heart thundered as I slipped out, wearing only the sheer robes they'd given me. Every step down the frozen corridor was treachery, every shadow a threat. But I did not stop. Not until I stood before the doors to his chamber, the king's chamber. I pressed my hand to the wood, the enormity of what I was about to do nearly crushing me. But for her, my mother, I would risk it all. And then I pushed the doors open. I slipped into the king's chambers, breath coming hard, face flushed from the cold, bare feet slapping against the cobblestones. My lungs burned as though I'd been running for hours, though it was only fear that carried me through. Chapter 8. Kaelen. Eirikur lay in the massive bed, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm, dusted with faint black hairs. The covers pooled at his waist, leaving the breadth of his torso bare, carved in shadow and moonlight. My throat went dry. I swallowed hard, heart hammering so loudly I was certain he'd hear it even in his sleep. What should I do? How should I speak? I opened my mouth, but no sound came. Not a word. Just the hush of my own ragged breathing. My feet carried me forward anyway, as though bewitched, closer and closer and closer. Gods, he was beautiful like this. His hair, dark and unbound, spilled across the pillows, his jaw sharp as a blade, his cheekbones cut from ice itself. He looked untouchable, dangerous even in rest, yet I ached, longed to reach out. Could he smell my scent already? Could he sense how much this moment was unraveling me? And then, movement. A shadow slid across the wall, twisting, stretching, rippling like smoke turned solid. I cried out just as a hand, large, calloused, merciless, clamped over my mouth. My scream died in my throat. Panic roared. The king was on his feet in an instant, one moment asleep, the next a beast unleashed, sword drawn, steel flashing silver in the moonlight. He moved with terrifying precision, no hesitation, no mercy. The blade cut through the dark. The shadow convulsed, shattered. A sound erupted, high, piercing, like crystal splintering mixed with a banshee's wail. It split my ears, rattled my skull, clawed through my very bones. The air reeked of burning iron and rot, as though something foul had been dragged from the grave and forced to breathe again. I staggered forward, clutching my head as the spirit's form fractured like glass, splintering into shards of black light. Its shape was hideous, not of flesh but of memory, a thing half-formed, dripping malice. Its eyes, if they could be called that, were pits of molten frost, hateful and ancient. The scream cut off. Silence dropped heavy as a tomb. The fragments of shadow crumbled into nothing, leaving the room trembling in its absence. And I was left gasping in the king's chambers, his sword still gleaming, his gaze burning into me. He lifted me as though I weighed nothing, my breath snatched from me in shock, only for another shadow to surge forward, jagged and shrieking. Its blade of darkness cut straight through. Before I could scream, he spun me so hard my stomach lurched, my vision blurred. Then I was slammed down against the bed, the air punched from my lungs. My head swam, the world tilting, but there he was. The king, towering, terrible, and so close. His body caged mine, his weight pressing me down, his chest heaving against my own. My white nightshirt had ridden up indecently, baring skin to the cold air, but it was nothing compared to the heat of him, wedged firmly between my thighs. We were both panting, ragged and raw, our breaths colliding. His scent, sharp, wild, unbearably masculine, flooded the air, dizzying me. It curled around me, filled my head, my lungs, every vein in my body. My heart thundered, but not entirely from fear. His nose brushed mine, a cruel intimacy that set my entire body on fire. And unbidden, I thought of it. The kiss. That filthy, ruthless kiss he had stolen, forced upon me, a theft I should despise. Yet the memory seared me. The heat of it. The taste of him. The way my body had betrayed me by craving more. Gods, I relished it even now. Sir, I breathed, though my voice trembled, my lips dangerously close to his. Don't speak, he spat, the words sharp, guttural, breaking the fragile thread between us. His hand moved fast as lightning, dragging cold steel across my throat. The knife pressed there, hard enough that I felt the sting, the edge of death kissing my skin. Just what the hell do you think you're doing? He growled. His eyes bore into mine, wild and burning, like he couldn't decide if he wanted to slit my throat or crush my mouth with his again. And God help me. I wasn't sure which I wanted more. I was... The words snagged in my throat, trembling, useless, because his hand was on me. Not at my throat anymore, not the blade pressing into my skin, but lower. Rough fingers dragging down, over my ribs, my hip, until they found my thigh. I should have flinched. I should have fought. Instead, heat bloomed beneath his touch as he hiked my nightshirt higher, the fabric sliding up, exposing more of me than I'd ever allowed another soul to see. His palm was hot, searing as though every inch of my skin he touched branded me his. My breath came short, shallow, and when I swallowed it felt like choking. He leaned in, closer still, his nose brushing mine, his mouth just shy of devouring me. His breath fanned against my cheek, dark, heavy and spiced with pine, smoke, and raw alpha musk. That scent. Gods above, it filled me, invaded me, wrapping around my senses until I couldn't think, couldn't breathe, couldn't want anything else. I felt dizzy, lightheaded, drunk on him. My body betrayed me with every thundering beat of my pulse, with the shameful shiver that coursed through me as his fingers inched higher, nearer the dangerous apex of me. "I asked you a question," he growled, his voice thick, gravel rolling in his chest. "What the hell are you doing in my chambers?" His thumb pressed into my inner thigh, too close, far too close. My back arched despite myself, a broken whimper slipping from my lips. "Answer me, Omega," he snarled, but his mouth ghosted over mine, so close I could almost taste him again. I came to beg you." I gasped, my words falling apart as he shifted, pressing himself firmly against me. "For mercy. For my mother." A deep rumble vibrated from him, dangerous, possessive, unyielding, and then the doors slammed open, the sound like thunder cracking through the chamber. Steel boots pounded against stone as guards burst in, their swords drawn, eyes widening at the sight before them. Their king pinning his trembling, half-bared bride against the silken sheets, the air between us thick with musk and danger. He stared at me for a long time and didn't pull away, the silence stretching out until it felt like the room itself was watching me strip. Every second it took him to move made the humiliation deeper, like salt in an open wound. Finally, he slid off me. I scrambled back, palms scraping silk, heart thundering in my throat, cheeks burning raw. "You don't have to beg me for anything, false bride." His voice was flat, slow, an icicle dragged across stone. He rose as if nothing had happened. The movement made the sheets whisper. The black fangs crowded the doorway like a living wall of steel, their armor swallowing the moonlight. "Your mother will be put to death." The words landed not like a statement, but like a verdict slammed closed. I couldn't breathe. For a moment all sound went away, except for the ringing in my ears and the ragged beat of my heart. "No," I said, the single syllable a raw, useless thing. "No, please. She's not a witch. She's—" My mouth dried. How could I make him see it? How could I shove science into the maw of superstition and hope it would swallow? He watched me with those black, patient eyes. "She is accused of witchcraft," he repeated, as if reading from a ledger. "The court has spoken. The law stands." "For God's sake, Your Majesty!" I lunged forward on instinct, knuckles white where they gripped nothing. "She cures people. She teaches. She knows things that could save your packs from blight. Solvier of the Frostfang line." The name tasted like a prayer and a blade. "She is kin to your mother." "She would never." His face flickered, the faintest tremor of something buried deep and older than me. For a heartbeat I thought I'd reached him, that the Frostfang name had cracked the ice around whatever heart he had left. Then the mask slid back into place. "Frostfang," he said quietly, as if testing how it sounded coming from my mouth. "So you chose your lies carefully." "No," I begged. "I told you." My voice broke. I stumbled for logic like a drowning man clutching at driftwood. "If you let her live, I will." I didn't know what I could give him. My words came out raw and useless. "I'll do anything." Anything. He considered me with a look that made the room cold. For a terrible, incandescent second, I could have sworn there was hunger there. Anger, desire, the old aching thing that had made him ruthless. Then he sighed. Small, almost bored. "You will not bargain for your mother's life with me like a common merchant," he said. "But—" His voice dropped lower, so that only I could hear. "You will have one chance." Hope, stupid and bright, sparked inside me. "Anything. Name it." He stepped closer until the heat of his body erased the chill in the room. He smelled of pine smoke and iron and something deeper, musk that made my head swim. "You will serve me," he said. "You will earn mercy." Live here, learn the tongue, the law, the court. Prove you are useful to me and the realm. Fail, and the pyre will answer for you both." I stared. The offer felt like a brand, both prison and possibility. "You'll let her burn if I refuse?" I asked, voice thin. He shrugged, almost bored. "The law will take its course." Rage and despair slammed through me, hot and blind. I lurched forward, fists balled, but a Black Fang's gauntleted hand caught my wrist like iron. I met Eriker's eyes, and for the first time since I'd stood in his hall, I did not shrink. "Then teach me," I said, trembling. "Teach me everything. I will be useful. I will do whatever it takes to save her." He studied me a long moment, like a predator tasting the air. Then, very slowly, he nodded once. "Keep him under watch," he ordered the guards. "He has 1 week. Teach him the tongue. Break him if you must. Then we shall see if he is worthy of mercy." The gauntleted hand tightened on my wrist and hauled me back toward the door. As I was dragged past him, his breath ghosted over my ear, low and private. "You will learn to obey," he murmured, "or you will watch her burn." Outside, the corridor felt colder than before. My chest ached with the weight of his bargain, and at the same time a reckless ember of something fierce and terrible lit inside me. I would not let the pyre take her. I would not go quietly. Chapter 9. Kaelen. It was an impossible task, and the king made sure I knew it. He turned my education into theater and torture. I was made to kneel until my knees bled, reciting law and lineage from heavy, leather-bound books until the words stuck like gravel in my throat. I polished his boots until my fingers went numb, smoothed his bedding with trembling hands, learned the names of every lord and their petulant peccadillos by rote. All the while he watched, eyes curving in that soft, contemptuous laughter that dug into me deeper than any lash. "Louder," he'd say when I stammered. "Prouder. You are the Queen of Vintera now. Don't sound like a beggar. Try again." "Thrymheim. No, flatter. No, flatter, like you mean it." Humiliation was a curriculum, and I passed every lesson by the skin of my teeth. One night, after hours of polishing until the hall smelled of oil and old leather, after a priest had humiliated me before the guilds, after a minister had smacked my hand for mispronouncing a single word, something inside me snapped. Not the loud, cinematic snap of a rope letting go. More like ice finally cracking through to water beneath. Quiet. I felt the cold give way to something hot and living. I stood up, not slowly, not on trembling knees. I stood as if my spine had the spine of a bear. The Black Fangs watched, surprised. The servants froze. Even the low murmur of the court stilled. The king's smile, the one that always sat like a white mask on his face, faltered for the length of a breath. "You will not make me scrub your boots tonight," I said. My voice didn't tremble. It was rough and small, and it carried all the months of rubbing my fingers raw. Heads turned. "I have scrubbed them enough to wash away more honor than this court could ever boast." He rose like lead, every inch predatory. "You insolent—" "Listen." I kept speaking, faster now, words spilling like a dam. "You call my mother witch. You call what she does blasphemy. You burn what you don't understand. You let ministers with grease in their hair and vultures in their robes decide who dies. You—" My throat closed for a second on all the fear I'd swallowed. "You made a law that binds me to you, and then you use it to chew me into entertainment. My mother will die at dawn unless you stop it. I'm not your pet king. I am not your game." Silence cracked. Someone laughed, thin and brittle. Flaria's smile from across the hall was like a blade finding use. The king's eyes were a storm, black and close. For a second I could see the old wound, the scar at his throat. I could see the man it had carved him into, and the monstrous throne he'd built around that absence. "You speak boldly for a man who begged for mercy in my bed," he said, low and dangerous. "You forget yourself, false bride." "False bride?" I spat, and the words were acid. I was the queen of Vintera before you stole a name to shame me. I will not watch the pyre take my mother while you tie yourself in laws." The hall shifted. A dozen hands hovered near hilts. The high priest's mouth opened, closed. The black fang's gauntlets gleamed. For a breath, the king looked like he might kill me where I stood. For a breath, I expected the cold to swallow me. Instead, he laughed, a sound that was half anger, half pleasure, and clapped slowly, deliberately, as if he were applauding a performance he'd been waiting years to see. "Very well," he said, still smiling. "You have spirit." "Useful." He leaned close, and the air between us hummed. "Tell me what you are." My breath caught. "What do you mean?" "You came into my room that night. You knew of an evil spirit, even if you didn't know directly. You say your mother isn't a witch. She is of the Frostfang line. But if she is not a witch, then you certainly are." I recoiled as if struck. Nobody was supposed to know that. The king rose. "I know what you are. Why you seek to save her life. She is no witch, but she protects you. Tell me the truth." I swallowed hard. "Yes, I have visions. I can see things that aren't there." His fingers closed on my chin, forcing me to meet his eyes. "Show me what you know. Prove to me she is not a danger, and that you are not the death that will befall us all." "How?" I rasped, just as he leaned closer, heat radiating off him like a furnace. "Your Majesty—" Then I saw them. Shadows flickering along the edges of the chamber, moving too fast, too silent. Assassins, dozens of them, slipping through the citadel like crawling ice. My stomach clenched as knives glinted in the torchlight, aimed straight for him. Without thinking, I lunged, throwing myself in front of him. Pain exploded as a blade sliced through my side. I gritted my teeth, tasting copper and fear. The king's roar shattered the night. In an instant, his body convulsed and shifted. Snow-white fur erupted across his skin, muscles swelling and claws tearing at stone and flesh. The white bear had awakened. The assassin screamed as he spun, massive paws smashing through armor and bone, teeth bared like jagged shards of ice. One man tried to stab him from behind, gone in a blink. Another raised a crossbow, snapped in two by the sheer force of his swing. The floor cracked, stone splintering under the weight of him as snow and blood flew in every direction. I pressed myself to the cold stone, trembling, trying not to look away, and yet I couldn't. He was a storm incarnate, a tempest of fury and white fire, and he had no mercy. Even as my body quivered and pain burned through me, I stayed put. I refused to run. I refused to hide. I would not leave him. Not now. Not ever. And when he finally paused, towering over the fallen, panting and massive, I met his eyes. Trembling, covered in blood and bruises, I refused to bow. My chest ached, a wild, dangerous ache, because loyalty and fear had never felt so tangled, so alive. "Mate." The word whispered through me as I stared at him in all his true form. It buzzed beneath my skin like a living thing, a breathing thing, sizzling everything inside of me. Then the shadows lunged. Without thinking, I leapt in the way, taking the dagger meant for the king. It pierced deep into my arm, hot pain ripping through me, and a cry tore out of my throat. My knees buckled, but I didn't fall. I wouldn't. Not while he was there, not while he needed me. The white bear roared, the sound rattling the very stones, shaking dust from the ceiling. His claws ripped through the shadows, tearing them apart like brittle paper. Each strike left streaks of black ichor sizzling against the floor, as if the very darkness bled. The air grew thick, heavy, choking, the scent of iron and snow mixing until my head swam. I clutched my bleeding arm, breath coming in shallow gasps, vision wavering. Every heartbeat echoed the pain, but I forced my eyes to stay on him. He was magnificent, terrifying. His fur was drenched in both blood and shadow, each swing of his massive body a promise of devastation. But the shadows weren't mindless. They swarmed, darting for his eyes, his throat, his unprotected flanks. He spun, massive paws crashing down, jaws snapping shut on screams that weren't human. And still, I struggled for air, my chest burning, the dagger's wound weakening me. My legs shook, but I didn't run. I wouldn't abandon him. If this was the end, then I would face it beside the beast who had claimed something inside me without permission. Mate. The word pulsed again, stronger now, even as my vision blurred and the battlefield dissolved into blood, ice, and shadow. Chapter 10. Kaelen. I woke groggy, the world a smear of light and shadow. The wound in my arm had sealed clean, like someone had stitched me with winter, but my body still pulsed with ache and fever. His face strobbed into focus above me. "Good," he said flatly. "You aren't dead." "My mother, please," I rasped, lungs raw. He stole another kiss then, sudden and sharp, and my whole body sang in spite of myself. I leaned into it, desperate for anything that might steady me, until he pulled back as if the contact had burned him. "I'm sorry," he said, cold now. "The date of her death is set." I nearly bolted from the bed, pain lancing through me and pinning me down. "But, our deal, please." "You've yet to convince me to keep her alive." He sat back in his chair, every movement measured. I realized then he hadn't slept through the night. The dark rims under his eyes made him look harsher, older, less human. "I'm not moved by please." "Please, if you could just meet her, talk to her. She isn't one of the witches of Solvir of the Frostfang line. She doesn't dabble in black magic. It's science, I promise." He watched me with that cool, clinical look that cut deeper than any blade. "I understand the words," he said finally, voice devoid of warmth. "But the law is the law. I am bound by it." Anger rose hot in my chest, bitter and raw. "So this deal was for nothing? Just so you could humiliate me?" He shrugged like it was a trivial thing. "Yes, I enjoy humiliating you." His jaw worked, slow and indifferent. "You are the false bride. Our marriage is a sham. Why not continue the farce?" My bottom lip trembled. This man, the king who had kissed me, the king who had ripped the world from under me and saved me and caged me, felt impossibly distant now. "You are here to be bred and nothing more," he said, voice flat as ice. "Do not forget your place." "Why are you being so cruel to me?" I whispered, the question raw, too small and too true. He looked at me as if I were a curiosity that had outlived its usefulness. "Because power requires it," he said. "Because I do not trust you. Because I will not be weakened by mercy or sentiment. Now," the word was final, "sleep. You have 1 week to prove your worth." He stood and left the chamber without another word, the door closing on me like a tomb. Alone on the bed, the taste of his mouth still burning my lips, I realized how utterly I had misread the storm I'd stepped into. He wanted nothing to do with me, except the thing that bound us both, law, blood, and a slow, terrible hunger that would not be sated by promises. I wandered the castle like a ghost, feet echoing on the cold stone. The halls felt endless and empty. Even the banners seemed to sneer. Nobody spoke to me. Nobles passed with noses turned, servants averted their eyes. The stone walls held the memory of 1,000 winters, and they mocked me in their silence. The tyrannical maid found me in the corridor, her chin high and her whip-thin voice sharper than the strap she carried. "Stand up straight, false bride. Shoulders back. Do not slouch like a rag." She shoved the strap against my ribs when I hesitated. The sting bloomed hot and bright. "Again," she snapped. I tried to lift my chin. My limbs trembled with the effort. She struck, harder this time, and pain lanced across my side. For a breath I felt something ancient unfurl in my chest. A low animal heat, claws at the edge of thought. I tasted iron, and the urge to shift rose like a tide. To tear, to rend, to end her voice forever. I clenched my teeth until the pain splintered my molars and forced the beast back down. I would not give her the satisfaction, not here, not now, not when everything I loved was on the line. I was about to round the corner, ready to return to the empty solitude of my chamber, when movement at the far end of the hall stopped me cold. The king, Eriker, was walking toward another doorway, shoulders squared, cloak brushing the stone. He didn't see me. He never did. But something in the way he moved, alone, deliberate, burdened, made the ache in my chest twist. For a moment, I stood frozen, watching him disappear through the next door, torn between following and hiding. The walls waited. The castle breathed around us. I want to see her. The king's words were quiet, but they struck like a stone into still water. My lord, Minister Halvard's voice cracked. You cannot. The statute forbids it. A chair scraped against the floor, the sound harsh in the hush. The statute is not iron. Halvard sucked in a breath, his tone rising. It is iron, your majesty. Forged in blood. Your father himself decreed it after the Frostfang witches razed his court to rubble. Do you not remember what their whispers did? How they turned brother against brother? Witches are never spared, never seen, always burned. That is the law. A heavy silence. Then the king said, and yet I will see her. Halvard nearly choked. If word spreads that you grant audience to one marked for fire, the priests will brand you soft. The people crave the pyre, they're hungry for smoke. You risk your crown itself. For the first time, the king's voice softened, though no less dangerous. Then let them think me cruel when I must be. Let them think me weak when I choose not to be. Arrange it. The minister faltered. As you command. And one more thing, the king said, tone edged with finality. See to it that the false bride remains near me at all times. No one is to mistreat him. He is to be well cared for. Are you sure? I've lived among these people for a long time, these animals. Minister Halvard's eyes flashed. They are no different than beasts, especially Kaelen. He's a wicked child, a child who refuses to bend or break. The people clamor for his mother's pyre. Halvard pressed, slick tongue wagging. Already they gather in the square. If you falter, they will call you weak. They will say you've forgotten what her kind did, how they nearly toppled the throne. I haven't forgotten, the king said, each word clipped, and I do not falter. She will come before me. I would look her in the eyes before the fire takes her. Halvard's lip curled. He lowered his voice, sly as a rat. And the false bride? Perhaps he should be. Surrendered to the church. They'll wring the truth out of him. The table shifted uneasily. Everyone knew what happened to boys in the care of priests, no matter how many hymns they sang. My gaze cut to Halvard, and he flinched. Kaelen stays, I said flatly. At my side. See to it that he is well cared for. A murmur of shock rippled through the chamber. Halvard's expression soured, twitching like a man caught with blood on his hands. I made a noise in my throat, and the king turned. Suddenly the door was being torn open, and the king was staring down at me.
Chapter 11. The Bear. Eriker. Kaelen shifted forward, panic sparking in his eyes, always too quick to feel, too stubborn to hide it. You don't understand, he said, voice tight. If you go alone... I have no need of your warnings, I cut him off. Your mother will tell me what I need to know. Not you. His jaw set. At least let me... Enough. I raised a hand, not to him, but to the guards stationed at the doors. Steel boots struck against the floor as they moved forward. Kaelen's eyes went wide. Eriker! Take the false bride back to his room, I ordered, voice cold enough to frost the air. One guard seized his arm, the other pressing a hand to the small of his back to guide him out. Kaelen twisted once, trying to shake free, but the guards were trained for more dangerous men than him. I didn't rise to help him. I didn't let myself. Instead, I watched as they pulled him from the chamber, his voice echoing back, ragged, raw, before the heavy doors shut behind him. The silence that followed was thick, and for a long moment, I let it sit there, pressing against my chest. Better he hate me for this than drag him deeper into shadows meant for me. The stairwell to the dungeons smelled of rust and damp, every step echoing like a tolling bell. The guards flanked me, but said nothing, though I caught the stiffness in their shoulders, the unease in the way their hands brushed their sword hilts. To them, she was no woman. She was corruption in the flesh. The iron door groaned as it opened. The cell was a narrow tomb, torchlight painting the stones in streaks of gold and shadow. She sat on the floor, thin frame swallowed by rags. Her hair hung in greasy mats, brown streaked with gray, her skin smudged with grime. Yet beneath the filth, there was a dignity in how she lifted her chin, a calmness in how she met my eyes. "You are not what I expected," I said, stepping closer. She gave a small, bitter laugh. "No horns? No dripping fangs?" I began to pace the length of her cell, hands clasped behind my back. "Tell me what you are, then. What you've done." Her voice was steady, not pleading. "I learned to ease women's pains, the mothers who did not want another babe, the ones whose wombs would kill them if they carried again. I learned how to draw the sickness from skin, how to treat fevers with herbs. That is all." I narrowed my eyes. "You call this not witchcraft?" "It is knowledge passed down from my mother's mother. Not the black arts Solvier wielded, nor the curses that toppled kings. Only ways to keep poor women alive." Her words stirred something old in me. Memories of hushed voices in my own household, my mother's kin. A connection I had buried, denied, forgotten. I stopped pacing, letting my gaze roam over her, her hunched shoulders, her calloused hands, her dirt-streaked face. She could have been beautiful once. She carried the same fire Kaelen bore, though where his eyes blazed blue like ice, hers were plain, dark brown. Their hair, too, nothing alike. The thought cut into me. "He is not your son." Her head snapped up, eyes widening, a flicker of something, fear, guilt, crossed her features. "No," she admitted, voice catching, then stronger. "But I've mothered him just the same." I stepped closer to the bars, the shadows clinging to my shoulders. "Who is he?" Her hands clutched the rags at her knees. "Your Majesty, please, he is all I have left. Whatever blood runs in his veins, whatever truth you think you seek, don't take him from me. Don't!" Her voice cracked, breaking the calm she had worn like armor. And for the first time, I felt the weight of her words. "He said he was Kaelen, son of Solvier of the Frostfang line. I take it that's your line, not his." "Yes," she whispered, eyes downcast. "Does he know?" "No! And I beg you, Majesty, do not tell him. He was an orphan. I loved him as my own, but I am not his true mother." I stared out the tiny barred window, shadows flickering across the walls. "I know that. He is a witch." "Yes," she whispered, voice trembling. "I've protected him our whole life.
He is precious. I beg you, let them burn me. He won't like it. He won't accept it. But it is the only way to keep him safe. From who? Her gaze cut through me, sharp and accusing, as if I should already know. And maybe I did. I heard. They tried to kill you once. An Omega assassin. The one you fell madly in love with. I snorted dryly. I was a fool back then. Aren't we all fools for love? She smiled tightly, but there was no warmth in it. I beg you, Majesty. Let me burn. I am ready. Don't let him save me. Once I'm gone, they won't dig any more. I felt it then. The weight of the court, the endless faces of those who would see me weakened, humiliated, dead. Many at the polar bear court thirsted for my failure, for my humiliation. Even if I crushed her, even if I burned her to ash, they would rise again with another excuse, another conspiracy. Her death would not end it. And still, the thought of Kaelen, of his fire, his loyalty, the way he faced the world without bending, it clawed at me. I could not let him see this. I could not allow him to think he had to save her. Are you certain? I asked, my voice low, dangerous. I am, she whispered. I have lived for nothing else but to keep him safe. Let it end. I gritted my teeth, my mind twisting. Duty, politics, desire, rage protection, all tangled. And still, the burning truth, I could not show weakness, not to the court, not to Kaelen, not to anyone. Very well, I said at last, voice colder than the dungeon stones. You will burn, but I will make certain he does not see it. Not until the moment it must be done. Her relief was palpable, but I knew the cost. Even if she fell, the vultures would circle. The hunger for power, revenge, whispers of witchcraft. None of it would end, and I would not falter. Chapter 12. The Bear. Iroquois. I walked back to my chambers, mind spinning. How was I supposed to keep Kaelen safe? I hardly knew him. The court didn't know him. The ministers would have his head if they could. And the shadows, they were already circling. And yet, that fire in his eyes, that insolent defiance, it had left me breathless. The memory of his lips on mine, taunting, bold, clung to my senses like smoke. I turned the key in the lock and closed the door. Not surprised, not even slightly. I found him waiting there on the bed. His pale blue eyes caught mine immediately. The moonlight spilled across him, illuminating the curves of his jaw, the tension in his shoulders, the way he didn't shrink back despite all he had seen. Your Majesty, he said softly, voice careful, yet defiant. You... I didn't let him finish. I stepped forward, letting the door click shut behind me. The fire that burned in him stirred something dark and unfamiliar in me, something that wanted him and feared him all at once. My hands itched to reach for him, to touch, to command, to protect. I studied him for a long moment, not as a king, not as a ruler, but as a man who couldn't let go, who couldn't stop thinking about the one Omega, who refused to bow entirely. Sit, I said, and tell me everything. Kaelen's lips parted in surprise. He didn't sit immediately, as if testing me. I let the silence stretch. Then he sank down, watching me with that same fierce, untamed gaze, and for the first time, I understood. This would not be simple. Nothing about him ever would be. I sat beside him,
Close enough to feel the warmth radiating off his skin. Close enough to taste the anger, the fear, the fire. He was breathtaking. Every curve, every line, every stubborn flare of his defiance burned into me. I swallowed hard. How does one survive wanting someone like this? Kaelen, I said, letting the weight of my voice settle over him like the first frost. I will tell you everything. You must understand. Your mother. She is... They have judged her. The pyre is set. I cannot stop it. You must know. It must happen. His blue eyes widened, disbelief and fury crashing over his features. You can't. You can't let them burn her? She's not a witch. She's... Science, I cut him off. I know what she does. I've seen it. It isn't witchcraft. But the polar bears, the old ways, we do not change. We do not yield. You know this, Kaelen. I know this. I am sorry. He shoved at me, trying to break free, fists striking my chest, nails digging into my robes. I will not let you. I will not let her die. You cannot be so cruel. I gathered him in my arms, the strength of a king, the certainty of the ancient bear flowing through me. He struggled, and I let him. His resistance, the fire in him, it was intoxicating. And then he wept. Hot trembling sobs that rattled through my chest. I held him tighter. Shh, I know, I whispered. I am so sorry. But we are the old blood. The polar bears are old. We do not bend. We do not change. We survive. And sometimes, survival demands cruelty. He buried his face against me, fists clenching into my robes. I let him. I would hold him through this storm, through the fire, through the grief, through everything. The night pressed in around us, cold stones and flickering torchlight. The world outside would burn, and still, I held him. He cried all night, and I held him through it, letting him unravel into my chest, letting his trembling body press into mine. His legs curled between mine, his arms clutching me, as if I were the only thing keeping the world together. I'll kill them all, he whispered suddenly, voice hoarse, fire and despair mixed in the words. You won't, I replied quietly, my hand smoothing over his hair. You are still the queen, false or not. The best thing you can do is rule. He lifted his head, eyes wide and frantic. But how? How when they don't respect me? They don't like you. I tightened my arms around him, letting the warmth of my body press reason into him. To rule isn't always about being liked, I said firmly. Do you think I forced you to learn everything for nothing? It wasn't to change fate, Kaelen. It was so you could study, so you could show yourself approved, so you would know the ways, the etiquette, the laws, everything. Soon you'll be an expert. You won't have to scrape behind those people. That is my wish for you. He stared at me, chest heaving, tears dampening the curve of his jaw. But I could see the flicker, the tiniest spark of understanding. His hands traced over mine, hesitant, seeking reassurance. Even if they hate me, he asked. Even if they despise you, I murmured. Power doesn't come from being loved. It comes from knowing yourself and holding your ground. You will survive this, Kaelen. You will rule Venterra as you should, and I will protect you while I can. He buried his face against me again, and I let the night hold us. Two hearts, tethered by fire and fear, yet unbroken.
I turned his face toward mine, taking in his watery blue eyes, trembling lashes that clung together like fragile threads. I kissed him, softly, just tasting. He made a noise in his throat, broken and raw, and it went through me like fire through ice. "Who are you?" I whispered.
Kaelen swallowed, a flush crawling up his neck like dawn, breaking over pale snow. "I can see your heart. It's thawing."
My chest tightened. My breath faltered. "What do you mean?" He touched my brow with trembling fingers, light as falling snow. There was a layer of frost on it. "That's why we've never seen spring. It's been 1,000 winters, but it won't be that way anymore." I almost reeled back, but I refrained. He was a witch, a seer. He couldn't help what he saw. "Do you know what happened to me?" I asked. My voice was low, dangerous, the kind of voice that once ended lives. "I heard you fell for an Omega who tried to kill you." His voice cracked. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," I snapped, my jaw clenched. "I slaughtered him." Kaelen's breath hitched, but he didn't pull away. His silence was worse than judgment. It was understanding. "But you wept afterward," he said softly. "You still do. For him."
The truth cut me open. I turned away, throat burning. "You don't know what it was like back then, Aaron. He was the only one who..." I swallowed hard, words jagged in my mouth. "Who saw me and didn't run. I was the polar bear king, ruthless. I could have killed anyone, and I did. Anyone who crossed me."
Kaelen's voice was fragile, but steady. "But you didn't kill me. You spared me." I looked back at him, his pale hair spilling like moonlight across my bedding, his lips parted, his chest rising quick and shallow. He was trembling, but not from fear. He was the only thing that didn't shrink from my shadow. "You aren't as cold as you think you are," he whispered. A bitter laugh escaped me. "And you aren't as brave as you think you are." Maybe not. His lips curved in the saddest smile I'd ever seen. "But I try." Something in me broke then, split open like ice cracking on a river. I cupped his face again, thumb brushing the tear tracks on his cheeks, and brought him into another kiss. This time slower, deeper, a dangerous promise wrapped in warmth. His lips parted beneath mine, soft, yielding, yet defiant in their own way. The warmth alone was enough to make me sing, though I hadn't sung since I was a child. My heart roared like it remembered something my mind had long since buried. Spring, the thaw, the first sunlight after endless snow. And as I kissed him, I thought, perhaps the false bride would be my undoing, or perhaps he would be my salvation. I woke with Kaelen in my arms, and my heart lurched. What the hell was I doing, cuddling next to this false bride? But something about Kaelen made me feel like a kinship, like I'd known him my entire life. I had lost my parents when I was young, and when I fell for Aaron, I had been a youngling prince, not understanding the ways of the polar bears. But he'd been the first I'd given my heart to, and when he stabbed me in the neck, I'd never forget the vicious gleam in his eyes. That memory still rattled in my bones, a wound that never closed, just scabbed and split open again every time I touched it. Kaelen stirred, those soft eyes gazing up at me, eyes that looked like they wanted to believe I wasn't just another manipulator in a long line of them. "Morning," he whispered, breath warm against my chest. I kissed him, slow and deep, tasting the salt of the night's tears, tasting the fragile hope that lingered between us. "Morning, I need to show you something." The decision to take Kaelen to the archives hadn't been something I planned, but I needed to show him how important his mother's death would be, and how it could not be prevented. It weighed on me like a curse, and maybe I had selfish reasons too. I didn't want Kaelen to hate me, not for this, not for carrying the truth inside me, like a knife hidden behind my back. I wanted him to see that I wasn't purposefully doing this to him, that fate was crueler than either of us. We dressed in silence, me in my signature blue woolly robes, heavy and comforting. Like armor that had long since lost its shine, and him in pale blue with gold along the seams, delicate threads that made him look less like a prince and more like something divine. My chest ached looking at him, because he wasn't mine, never could be, and yet here he was, moving beside me, as though we'd always walked in tandem. The corridors were cold, frost edging the stones, the walls humming with the ghosts of our ancestors. I could hear their voices in my head, old polar bear kings muttering the same words over and over. We do not change, we do not yield, and maybe that's why I hated them. Because Kaelen deserved change, deserved mercy, and I was dragging him into a place built to strip him of both. He glanced at me as we descended the stairs, torchlight flickering across his face. "Where are we going?" "To the truth," I muttered, though my throat tightened around the words. "To the place that will ruin you. To the place that will ruin me." Every step echoed, like fate itself was laughing. We walked hand in hand until the torches narrowed to a tunnel of light. The corridors of Icefang were a maze of stone and memory, spiral staircases that hummed with old songs, passages hung with tapestries of snowstorms and battles, and doorways sealed with iron runes. Each step echoed with the names of those who had walked before us, kings who carved winter into law, queens who kept the flocks from starvation, priests who read the sky for omens. The air tasted of dust and old smoke, of vellum and vinegar, the scent of 100 winters of record-keeping. The archive itself was a cavern of shelves, tall as pines, stacked with scrolls bound in leather, tablets of carved bone, and ledgers sealed in black wax. Lanterns swung and threw the room into stitches of amber and shadow. I led him between the stacks, feeling the gravity of it all, the bare lore, the blood pledges, the things we told ourselves so the world would obey. "Listen," I said, and my voice sounded too small in the hollow. I pulled out a thin codex stitched with white thread and opened it. The script was like frost on glass. There was Salvir of the Frostfang line. I let the name hang. She was brilliant. She taught our people ways to coax food from poor soil, to stitch wounds closed that no priest's prayers could touch. But brilliance terrified men who fed on fear. Kaelen watched the words as if they might scald him. His fingers tightened around mine. "They called her witch," he murmured. "They did," I said, and not without reason the old courts feared what they didn't understand. It's a story older than my father's crown. When Solvir's experiments spilled into the capital, crops altered in strange cycles, men sicker in ways priests couldn't explain, secrets whispered into the ears of the desperate.
Panic took root. The unrest fed itself on rumor. Husbands turned on husbands. Brothers killed brothers. We nearly tore ourselves apart. I closed the codex, thumb resting on the cover like a seal. The Statute of Ashes was written then, I told him. Not simply law, but a promise. My father, your king's father, signed it with hands that had seen too much blood. Witchcraft became a word that fixed the fear into a shape. Burners were appointed. Trials were perfunctory. It was easier to kindle a pyre than to reinvent a world. Kaelen's face went slack. But my mother, his voice broke. She heals midwives' hands. She teaches girls how to stop a pregnancy. She fixes rot out of orchards. She changes the things a man like Halvard cannot hold in his fist, I said, and that terrifies them more than any whispered spell. I set the book down and searched the shelves for another, a long, rolled charter stained with smoke. Do you know why the law is so cruel? Because when disorder starts at the edges, it always eats the center. The priests preached. The nobles pointed fingers. The populace needed a scapegoat to stop noticing the rot in their own houses. He swallowed, the sound wet and raw. So they burn the smart ones. They burn the inconvenient. I didn't try to hide the bitterness. And yet, I said, and my hand tightened around his, I know she is not a witch. I've seen enough to know the difference. But the powerful men at court, Halvard, Vlaria, the glacier paws who smell a chance to climb, would use any excuse to cut me down. If I do not make an example of her now, they will make me one later. It's not justice. It's chess. Kaelen's shoulders slumped. He let the hand I held go slack and sank onto a low stool between the stacks, eyes hollowing. You mean you'll let her burn so they won't turn on you? Chapter 13. The Bear. Irakar. Listen, I said, voice barely more than a breath. I will not let them take him from you. I will not let the church have his flesh. I promised that my jaw clenched on the lie that had become truth. We will do what we can. Learn. Live. Show them you are not what they fear. He lifted his head, and the light found the bruise along his side where the dagger had struck. If she burns, he said, voice small as a cracked bell, what then? We keep living, I answered, and it felt like an oath and an insult at once. We make ourselves the example. We rule so well that their hunger is sated by our competence, not by the scapegoat's ashes. I looked down at him, and the thought hit me like a blade, not to save him now, not to spare him, but to make him powerful enough that no one would dare scorch him again. He wanted to argue, to scream, to beg, but the archives closed around us in a hush, and the books watched like witnesses. Outside, the citadel kept turning. The court readied its torches. Inside the stacks, in the company of scrolls that recorded centuries of terror, we held on to each other. Two bodies stubborn against the long winter the world insisted upon. So it's true. The voice slipped from the shadows like oil. I let go of Kaelen and whirled. Halvard stood there, all greasy smile and beady eyes, and beside him, my sister. I told you, she whispered, thin and hungry. He's gone mad again, siding with the witches. You know what they've done to us. Halvard's grin spread. Yes, I see it all too clearly now. It explains why you wouldn't give this boy to the church. Kaelen laughed. You mean to you? I've always resisted your advances.
Halvard did not even bother with shame. He only blinked, as if offended at the interruption of his appetite. No matter. You'll be subdued soon enough. Guards, the king has lost his reason. Take him back to his chambers. My own guards stepped forward without hesitation. My mouth went dry. I'd not given the order. I'd not moved.
What the hell is going on right now?
I barked. You don't see it, brother? My sister purred, the laugh in her voice like broken glass. You never were the brightest. Who do you think sent that assassin to kill you? The world slid. The archives blurred. The codices on their shelves became unreadable script. Betrayal peeled open like a wound. The truth stung. My sister's eyes gleamed with a hunger I had felt only once before, when my father's crown first weighed on his head, and men began to whisper plots over wine. Halvard's mouth was a slit of satisfaction. How long? How long had they schemed? How long had Halvard watched me with that twitching gaze, not merely as minister, but as something else, something that wanted Kaelen himself? My stomach turned as the pieces dropped, the bribes, the late-night petitions, the way Halvard had lingered too long in the corridors where Kaelen slept. Had he been after the boy for months? Years? Before I could breathe, a wintry blast slammed through the archive, cold like a blade, strafing the lamps and scattering papers. Frost crawled over the shelves, as if winter itself had been given a voice. Don't let him shift, Halvard screamed, voice raw, almost pleading. Seize him, bind him, do not let him. Guards moved like a tide, blades flashing, boots grinding across stone. They weren't surrounding Kaelen. They were surrounding me. Kaelen staggered, breath coming in ragged bursts, his hands trembling at his sides. His body was still his own, human, fragile, breakable. But the air around him vibrated with something dangerous, something waiting. His eyes found mine, wild and desperate, still unbearably human, and my gut clenched with the memory of every blade he'd taken for me, every wound he'd bled to keep me alive. The guards pressed in, steel ringing as they raised their swords. I felt the shift clawing at my bones, begging to tear me apart, to unleash the beast that had never bowed to law. But their hands gripped my arms, their weight dragged me down, their voices barked commands I couldn't hear through the rush of blood in my ears. Hold him, Halvard shouted, spittle flying. Do not let him change. Strike him down if you must. My sister's shriek knifed the air, but I barely heard it. All I saw was Kaelen, still a man, still fighting to stand, to breathe, to live. Something inside me answered, cold and absolute. Ownership was no longer law, it was instinct. He was mine, and mine alone, and no statute, no minister, no army of trembling men could take that truth away. Unhand me, I roared, voice hammering through the stone. For a moment they faltered, the old instinct to obey surging against Halvard's orders. Their grips loosened, but only barely. Halvard's lips curled into that wet, sick smile. Your Majesty, think of the court, think of the crowd, think of the law. I fixed him with a look cold enough to cut. The law is mine. The guards hesitated. My sister's eyes gleamed with that old, feral hunger, the one that had haunted me since childhood. Kaelen straightened behind them, defiant despite the blood on his lip, and I swore the air bent toward him,
as though the frost itself waited on his command. Halvard's face twisted, calculations collapsing into rage. His hand darted for something hidden at his belt. The archive reeked of dust and betrayal. Iron sang in my mouth. I could feel the beast raking at my insides, furious at the leash. This time, I did not fight it. And then, our minds locked. The link, old as our bloodline, ancient as the ice. No words left our mouths, but thoughts struck like claws. Brother, her voice cut through me, as frozen glass. How many more must die before you step down from your cursed throne? Her rage burned through the tether, images slamming into me. Women screaming at the pyre, villages starving, children's bones beneath rags of frost. You think yourself savior? I roared back along the link, the force of my thought making the stone walls tremble around us. You murder me in my own hall and call it justice. She lunged, teeth bared, but even as her body collided with mine, her voice poured into my skull. You never listen. Witch trials, burnings, all for men's fears, while the people rot. And now you marry a peasant, a false bride, and call him queen. You've lost your reason. Her words bit deeper than her claws. I had not left the castle in a century. I had ruled from stone and shadow while my people starved. Kaelen's voice rose in memory, accusing me of the same. So you send assassins? You conspire with Halvard to see me dead? Her paw slammed into my ribs. I reeled back, snarling. She circled, eyes burning with venom and truth. You would never yield, never see reason otherwise. Had I been born a man, the throne would be mine. You know it. You always knew it. Our roars ripped the air as we collided again. A storm of fur and ice crashing against the archive's stone. Shelves splintered. Scrolls scattered like snow. The tether between us burned white hot. Grief and fury. Love twisted into rivalry, too deep to mend. Her teeth flashed for my throat. I moved before thought, instinct older than kingship. My forelimbs wrapped her, forcing her down. She writhed, screamed through the link. Damn you, brother. Damn you for wasting the crown. And then, snap. The sound echoed both in the chamber and in my skull. The tether went dead, cut clean, leaving nothing but cold silence. She crumpled beneath me, white fur slack, eyes staring past me into a place I could not follow. For a long breath, I stayed there, muzzle pressed to hers, listening for a voice that would never come again. And in the terrible silence that followed, I knew the truth. The bond of blood was broken not by her ambition, but by my crown. Her body was still beneath me, fur already cooling, eyes dull with the silence of death. My sister, my blood, gone by my own hand. The link that had bound us since birth was severed, the echo cut clean. I dragged in a breath, ice filling my lungs. My chest heaved with the effort of shifting back, bones cracking, fur dissolving into flesh, until I knelt bare and bloodied on the cold stone. The room was wreckage. Scrolls torn, shelves toppled, shards of history strewn like bones across the floor. But none of it mattered. I lifted my head and froze. Kaelen was gone. The bed of scrolls where he'd stood, eyes wide and blue as oceans, was empty. His scent, fresh, warm, sweet with the Omega's pull, lingered but faint, trailing out into the corridor. Halvard's stink clung to it. Grease and rot. The minister. He had taken him.
Rage flared, white hot, and my vision darkened at the edges. My claws itched for the shift again, but there was no one left in this room to tear apart. Only my sister's body, cooling in the ruin we had made. Halvard. My voice was a growl that rattled the stone. You dare touch what is mine. Kaelen's laughter from earlier stabbed into my skull. You mean to you. I've always resisted your advances. So it was true. Halvard had been circling him like a carrion crow from the start, biding his time. And I, blind with grief and stubborn rule, had let him slip through my fingers. Not again. Not Kaelen. I rose, naked, chest still slick with my sister's blood. My crown meant nothing. My throne meant nothing. There was only one thought left in me now. Find him. And God's help Halvard when I do.
Chapter 14. Kaelen. Halvard's claws dug into my wrist as he yanked me down the corridor, the stone walls slick with ice and dripping shadows. His breath hit my face, sour and rotten, his grip too strong, too inhuman. My chest heaved. Something was wrong. His jaw twitched, and then foam spilled over his lips, thick and white, like he was choking on the sea. His skin rippled. His eyes, once dull and calculating, split open into a dozen more, yellow, lidless, burning like sick lanterns in the dark. No, this wasn't a man. This wasn't even a bear. The shadows around us slithered like eels, coiling and hissing, and then he cracked apart, bones rearranging with sick, wet snaps. His arms multiplied, legs bending backward, claws sharpening into long, spidery black limbs that dragged along the floor with a screech. His body swelled and thinned all at once, a spindly carcass with too many joints, his head splitting down the middle until his grin reached his throat. The stench hit me. Grave dirt, rot, old blood. My stomach lurched. A necromancer. He's been here the whole time. The shadows. Him. I tried to twist free, but his limbs webbed around me, tightening, dragging me close. His voice scraped across my skull like broken glass. Your power is wasted in your father's court, little cub. I'll drink it from your bones. No, not like this. Something deep inside me, older than words, older than reason, split open. A roar tore from my throat, tearing flesh as my bones cracked. My skin burned, ripped apart, and the white storm came. Fur burst from me, claws tearing at the ground, teeth gnashing. I fell forward, my hands already paws, my body stretching, bursting, filling with something wild, primal. The world bled into ice and fire. I was a bear, a polar bear, massive, white, dripping with frost. My breath steamed, my claws gouged the stone. Halvard hissed, spider limbs thrashing, shadows screaming from his hideous form. He lunged, all teeth and claws, and I met him, no hesitation. My paw slammed into his chest, bones cracking under the weight. He reeled, shrieking, but the shadows clung to me, pulling, gnawing, trying to sink teeth into my soul. No, you won't take me. You won't hollow me out. I bit down, my jaws closing around one of his limbs. Black ichor sprayed, burning, stinking, and his scream shook the rafters. He lashed out with another arm, tearing across my flank, but the pain only drove me harder. I lunged again, roaring so loud the stones quivered and slammed him into the wall. He screeched, shadows writhing, choking me, whispering, begging me to yield. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. Not while Father was fighting for me. Not while the people starved. Not while this monster dared to wear human skin. I sank my claws into his chest and dragged them down, and for the first time I felt the full weight of what I was. A bear of the old blood, a storm of frost and rage. Halvard's limbs split and spidered, his body stretching into a grotesque shadow beast, black ichor dripping from 100 crooked joints. His voice slithered around me, slick and cold, as if it came from inside my skull. Little seer. Little spark. You were never meant to live. I was there when your kind bled us into famine. I will drink you dry and wear your skin as my crown. I staggered back, fur bristling, paws raking stone as the power inside me bucked and screamed. He's going to kill me. He's going to rip me apart. Then, Erurki. The chamber doors exploded inward in a rush of frost, and he was there in his massive polar bear form, a wall of blue-white fur and roaring fury. His eyes, icy fire, locked onto mine, then onto Hallvard, and I felt the bond between us like a shield settling over my chest. "You will not touch him," his voice thundered through the link. Hallvard screeched, limbs lashing. Shadows struck like whips, black tendrils wrapping around Erurki's throat, my haunches dragging us down. "Do you know what I am, cubs?" Hallvard hissed. His shape pulsed, 1,000 eyes opening across his hide. "I was bred from the first necromancers, the ones your precious Solvir banished when the Frostfang line purged us from the north. I am the last of them, the last eater of hearts, and I will feed on yours." Rage ripped through me. My claws flashed, silver arcs in the torchlight, tearing into one of his limbs. It split, shrieking black tar. Erurki lunged in the same breath, jaws closing on another. Together we ripped, pulled, severed. Hallvard wailed, his voice echoing in too many tones. Man, beast, ghost. "You can't kill what's already dead." "Then we'll tear you apart until nothing's left," I snarled through the bond. My own voice shocked me. Low, feral, sure. We became a storm, Erurki slamming him into the stone, me slashing, biting, the air thick with frost and shadow. Limbs cracked under our weight, ichor sprayed like a foul rain. His shrieks grew thinner, weaker. "No, I was promised the throne, promised the queen." "You'll have the pyre instead," Erurki roared. And with one final strike, his jaws crushing the core of Hallvard's writhing chest while I raked the last limb free, the creature collapsed, shadows bursting apart like ash in a gale. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by our heavy breaths, and the drip of black blood sizzling against frost. The shadows hissed and died, dissolving into the stones until only a foul stink remained. My paws trembled beneath me, claws scraping against the floor, fur sticky with black ichor. My chest heaved, my throat raw with the growl that still clawed its way out of me. I had shifted without meaning to. Power had answered me. Not timid, not half, full, wild, unchained. I looked down at myself. Massive paws, white fur streaked with soot, muscles singing with strength I'd never known. For the first time, I wasn't just pretending to belong to the Frostfang line. I was one of them. I was a bear. But the tremor in me wouldn't stop. My whole body shook as if the shadows were still inside me, gnawing, gnashing. Erurki padded forward, his own bear form staggering from exhaustion, blood matting the thick fur around his throat where Hallvard's tendrils had wrapped tight. He touched his muzzle to mine, and for a moment we simply breathed together, hot steam in the cold air, hearts pounding in rhythm. The fight was over, but I wasn't steady. I collapsed into him, and he caught me, strong forelegs folding me into his chest. I pressed my face against the rough fur at his throat and whispered, voice breaking, "This needs to stop." He shifted back, dragging me with him, until I was human again too, trembling in his lap, his arms wrapping around me like a shield. His skin was hot against mine, his breath harsh in my ear. "People cannot be put to death for old ways," I said again, firmer this time though my voice shook. My fists twisted in his robes. "We can't keep burning and killing. We'll only feed monsters like him. You—" I looked up, meeting his storm blue eyes. "You have the power to change it." For a long moment he only stared at me, eyes unreadable. The king. My lover. My doom. Then his arms tightened, his forehead pressed to mine, and his voice was low but certain. "You're right. It's time I stopped acting so powerless." His lips brushed mine, soft, lingering, a vow in the cold air. "It's time I ruled." 6 weeks later, the great doors of the castle groaned open. For the first time in a century, the polar bear king stepped into the world beyond his walls. His steps were hesitant, almost timid, as though the very earth might reject him. But Kaelen was at his side, their hands twined together, his presence steadying. They walked together through the ruins of what had once been Kaelen's village. The hut where he'd grown up stood in shambles, roof caved in, walls blackened with rot. The king's breath caught. His throat worked, but no sound came until finally, "How did I never see this?" His voice broke. "Because you didn't want to see," Kaelen said softly, without cruelty. "Just truth." "And there's more." Kaelen led him on. He showed him the orphanages overflowing with children, hungry eyes too old for their faces. He showed him the churches fat with gold and corruption, where shadows whispered even in daylight. He showed him his mother's storefront, torn down to nothing, the stones scattered like bones. A century of winters, of silence, of decay. Now it was time for spring. The king lifted a hand, and the air shifted, a ripple of frost curling through it, not as a weapon but as a promise. His voice was low, almost uncertain. "What are your plans, false bride?" "To rebuild," Kaelen said, chin high. "To invest in science. To discover things no one has dared to before." A silence stretched. Then the king looked at him, not as monarch, not as ruler, but as a man stripped bare. His eyes searched Kaelen's face, hesitant. "And for me? Is there room in that little heart for more?" Kaelen laughed, bright and unrestrained, and kissed him, soft, sure, sealing everything between them. "Yes," he teased against his lips, "only a little." He reached for him, but the king darted back with a sudden boyish grin, mischief in his eyes. Kaelen gave chase, laughter spilling between them as frost and spring tangled in the air. And for the first time in 1,000 winters, the world thawed.